رسوله الكريم سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. As the brother stated, that there are so many brothers who have the privilege to sit with the Shaykh and talk to them, but not everybody have that access to them. Now, in this very unique encounter, we will be asking the Shaykh some not too personal questions, but some questions, inshallah. We would not embarrass our Shaykh or put him in a tight position. As far as I know, the Shaykh Jazakallah Khair, Abdur Raheem McCarthy, Abdur Rahman, he's been away from the West since he was 18 years old or 19 years old. And of course, it's very, very long time experience outside Western society. And this is one of the things, inshallah, we would like to know about him. But my first question, which is the thing is in everybody's mind, is how did you accept Islam, and what was your first encounter with Islam, and who introduced you, who told you about Islam?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala wa ba'd. When I first learned about Islam, my first encounter with Islam, and let me go back just for a few minutes to say, that before Islam, I had started in a life, I guess, I can blame it on basketball, because I love basketball, and playing basketball, it took me to the good basketball courts, which were mostly in African American communities. So when I started to hang out in these places a lot, and I was affected by them and their culture, their way of life, until I actually became like one of them. And during this time, I got into a lot of bad things. The everyday life of the Shabbat, I don't know how open I should be, sitting in the masjid. If we were sitting in the office, it might be a little different. And there were some things you feel embarrassed about now that we used to do before Islam and Jahiliyyah. And different crimes, what have you. And this life, I went really deep into it. And I think maybe the only one here who knows how deep is probably Sheikh Haman. I got very deep into that. And maybe in another episode, if we find the fa'idah, we'll do it. But now I'll just keep it brief. I got into that lifestyle, and I was going down the wrong path. But one of the people who I was with in the life of crime, his father happened to be Muslim. So we were in D.C. one day, and I saw him listening to tapes of the Quran and following in his English Quran. So I started to ask him about Islam. And one of the first questions I had, as a white guy, can I be Muslim? Hear about the Nation of Islam and the white man is the devil and these things, So I didn't really know if I could be Muslim as a white person, So I asked him, he explained to me what Islam, and as I was going back to where I live in Virginia from D.C., I read a little bit about the belief of the Muslims in Jesus Christ, ﷺ, and I was affected by this. And the different, obviously, completely different than aqeedah or outlook of the difference in belief. But I left the books on the shelf. I didn't read it for some time, and then I was in a car accident. It's also a rather long story. One day I was just sitting in the house, and I remember these books. And this is the Riwayah al-Mukhtasara, jiddan, there's a lot involved here, but you have your lecture coming out, so I'm giving it very, very brief. And I was in the house, and I remembered the books that I had about Islam. So this one book, even though a lot of brothers feel it's not a good book for non-Muslims, but it was good for me, the Islam Religion of Truth. And I read through it, the most thing that affected me obviously was the thing of Tawheed, the difference between Islam and Christianity, and the oneness of Allah and Islam, and the relationship of Muslim between him and Allah, and he's straightforward without having to go to any middleman or like you have in Christianity. This affected me greatly, obviously. But one thing that really affected me, which I can say proudly now, but it was because he mentioned something of the Sunnah al-Fitra, that a Muslim does to have tahara for salat. And one of the things he mentioned was that if a Muslim uses the the restroom, we'll say, the Canadian style, not bathroom, huh? I learned the Canadian styles, huh? That he said that if you go to the restroom, that you, that a Muslim, he would actually, have to close the door and not do it in front of other people, and he would sit down. So all my life, I preferred to do this. But as you know, it's a big aib, if they're a non-Muslim man in the West, to not use the bathroom in front of other men, or to sit down, it's like a woman. And, but that's what I like to do. I couldn't tell anybody that, obviously, But after the Muslims did this, it affected me in a great way. And this is what Muslims don't realize. What I talked before in my last lecture about implementing Islam, how it affects the non-Muslims. They don't realize this. And I'll tell you an interesting story that a brother, I believe from Saudi Arabia, he went to study in a university in the UK. So they had a place in the university, it was a small university, where they would send their laundry. The woman, an older lady, she would clean the laundry, she would wash it and then iron it and send it back to the students. So she found this one guy, he was the only one who had clean, underwear. And this is something she's been doing for 25 years. And none of the kuffar, none of the non-Muslims have clean underwear. This is something we all know. Because they don't have istinja as we have istinja. They weren't taught, as our beloved Prophet ﷺ taught us. So she was surprised, She was curious, every time this guy never has any. And then she starts to look for him, It's always clean. She was really, shocked. So she asked him, what is this? And he explained to her that I'm a Muslim, and our Prophet ﷺ, he ordered us, if we want to pray, we have to make istinja, so we can all be in the purest state, and we have no filth on our clothes, and what have you. And she was affected by this and became Muslim right away. So the Muslims don't think about this. This type of thing has become ada. It's become a custom or a culture to the Muslims. But this type of thing, it affects the non-Muslims. So this affected me greatly. And I was 18 at the time. A lot of people, when you talk to them about Islam, a lot of Westerners, they might say, yeah, Islam is, he believes it. But, the change is difficult for him. But I didn't have anything to do. I was just, I wasn't going in a good direction anyways. I didn't have anything to lose. I didn't have a wife who was going to divorce me and take half of what I own or anything like that. So, alhamdulillah, the next day after I read the book, that was on a Thursday night, I went to Washington, D.C., and I went to the Islamic Center after Maghrib, and I prayed, just as the visitor we had here prayed with us today. I didn't know what I was doing, obviously, but I prayed with the Muslims, and I did my shahada after Salat al-Maghrib, and that was in January, the beginning of January 1994, and here we are today, alhamdulillah.
Now, I'll ask you a question in another area. Who was your first teacher?
My first teacher? My wife, Abdur Rahman. She was my first teacher. Alhamdulillah, she was, when I got married, and my wife, her English is better than what she thinks, but she's afraid to speak it. But, so when I first got married to my wife, she wouldn't really speak English to me, and I didn't know any Arabic. So one of us had to break, and I left my country, to learn Arabic. So it was a good opportunity for me. And Jazakallah khairan, she didn't teach me the Sudanese slang. And she used to teach me the classic Arabic. And then she was affected. She would even speak it sometimes to her family, and they would laugh, what are you talking about? So she would speak very classic Arabic to me. And that's when I first started learning Arabic, was from her. But actually before her, I can say, she was, I guess, the main effect. But I also had the famous Qari in Virginia, Sheikh Muhammad al-Ra'i. I studied with him a little bit in Virginia, the basic